Most jobs come with rules. Don't be late. Don't break anything. Don't ask questions you're not paid to ask. But this one only came with one. Don't go into the basement. No explanation, no warning story, just 4 words delivered so casually, it felt rehearsed, like people before me had heard the exact same sentence. I needed the job, so I just nodded, said okay, and didn't think about it again. Until about 3 weeks. Then I started hearing things. My name is Cal. I'm not giving my last name, and if you think or feel like you know who I'm talking about, please don't connect those dots, because there are reasons for that which will make sense soon enough. The man I worked for, I'll call him Mr. Hargrove, he was one of the wealthiest people I've ever been close to. His name is on buildings, on foundations, on the kind of charitable organizations that exist partly so that very rich people have somewhere respectable to put their image. And I was hired as the live-in property manager for his private retreat. Not his main place in the city, but his off-grid property, which is 12,000 square feet built into the side of a hill. 60 acres of private land, dense forest on 3 sides, a lake on the 4th. The salary was obscene, I mean that. The number they offered made me reread the email twice. Full accommodation, a vehicle, a monthly supply allowance on top of everything else. I had no good reason to say no. I had one reason to hesitate. During the initial walkthrough, the woman handling the property arrangements, Sandra, mid-50s, immaculate, was giving me the tour of the ground floor when she opened a door at the end of the main hallway, saw the stairs going down, and closed it almost immediately. One fluid motion. Like muscle memory. As if she'd done it before and caught herself. She didn't say anything, just moved on to the next room. The house was genuinely beautiful. Expensive in every detail, but in that understated way that people with serious money tend to prefer. Big windows facing the lake. A kitchen that probably cost more than my last car. Staff quarters that were nicer than most apartments I had rented in my 20s. My predecessor had left nothing behind. No personal items, no notes for the next person, just the official maintenance logs, which were perfect and impersonal. When I asked Sandra about him, where he went and why he left, she said he'd taken another position, which she said quickly, and we moved on. Later on, I found out the truth about 4 months in, from a woman at the hardware store in the nearest town, saying she recognized the estate's address on my account and said she'd heard through the usual small-town chain of people who know people that the previous property manager hadn't taken another job, but he'd been admitted to a psychiatric unit 6 weeks before I started. By the time she told me that, I already knew something was wrong. But first, the first month was completely fine. The work was straightforward. Grounds upkeep, managing contractors, handling deliveries, keeping the systems running. Hargrove visited once that month, stayed a weekend, was polite and distant in that practiced way wealthy people get when they've spent decades interacting with staff. We talked schedules and maintenance. He never brought up the basement, but on his last morning as he was getting into the car to go back to the city, he stopped, turned back, and looked at me differently than he had all weekend. He said, "The rule I told you about the lower level. You remember it, right?" I said yes. He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, with an expression I couldn't quite place. Not threatening, more like something personal, like he was checking something off a mental list and wasn't entirely comfortable doing it. Then he got in the car and left. I thought about the way he looked at me for the rest of the day and brushed it off, but things started to get strange when I started hearing sounds at night. The sounds started in week 6, the first time I almost missed it entirely. I was in the kitchen late, past 11, making something to eat, and underneath me, through the floor, I heard something, low and rhythmic. But I just told myself it was the boiler, because the maintenance documents mentioned the boiler room was somewhere in the lower level. Completely reasonable. I ate, I went to bed, forgot about it. 2 nights later, same time, same sound. This time, I actually stood still and listened. And that's where it gets strange. The rhythm wasn't mechanical. I know the difference. Mechanical sounds are consistent. Machines don't lose their place or speed up slightly and then catch themselves. This had tiny variations, small ones, but they were there, like the difference between a metronome and a person tapping their finger to a beat in their own head. Whatever was making that sound had intention behind it. I didn't mention it to Sandra on the next weekly check-in. What would I say? I heard a sound through the floor and it felt weird? I wrote it in my personal log instead, and kept moving. But strange things started to happen, and I unwillingly started paying attention to them. The thing is that once you start paying attention to a place, you'd start noticing things you'd been seeing but cannot fully process. The hallway near the basement door always ran cold. Not dramatically colder, but consistently. A few degrees. I checked the HVAC, checked the vents, checked the window seals. Nothing explained it. The hallway near that door just wasn't the same temperature as the rest of the house. The overhead light in that section would dim sometimes, just slightly, over a minute or two, then return to normal. I called an electrician. He found nothing, charged the call-out fee and left, looking mildly baffled. And then there was the door itself. I wasn't watching it deliberately, but late at night, when the house was quiet and the lake outside was still, I started noticing a sound coming from behind it. Not the floor vibration from the kitchen, something different, more subtle, less like noise, and more like the specific quality of silence that isn't actually empty, the kind that has something living inside it. But I told myself I was developing a fixation because of too much time alone. Then one night, I walked past the door, and the handle moved. To be honest with you, I've gone over this moment so many times, and I know how easy it is to add things that weren't there. But here's exactly what happened. It was just before midnight. I was walking to the kitchen. As I passed the door, the handle moved. Not fully, not all the way down. A small, partial movement. It's the type a handle moves when someone pushes the latch from the other side. I stopped. The handle returned to its resting position. I stood there for 2 minutes, watching it. Nothing else happened. So I hurriedly went to the kitchen, stood at the counter, and I went through the possible explanations of what I saw, very deliberately. 1. Maybe I imagined it. 2. Air pressure. Structural settling. Something mechanical in the latch. And 3. Something touched it from the other side. I wanted it to be 1 or 2, I swear I really did. Then, from behind that door, from somewhere down below the floor, I heard 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like something telling you they are in there. Then silence. I ran quickly out of there to my personal quarters, and the next morning I emailed Sandra, not about the knocking, because I thought it was my ear hearing things for being alone. I just described the temperature, the lights, the other sounds, kept it practical and maintenance language. Her reply came 4 hours later. HVAC calibration. Should look into it remotely. Old properties have quirks. Call the electrician back if the light issue continues. Not a single word about the sounds. Not a single word about the door. I reread that email 3 times, and I understood something. Sandra knew something. Because her response was too precisely targeted at the things with mundane explanations and completely silent on the things without them. That's not an oversight. That's a choice. That night at 2 a.m, I just got up and walked to the door. I didn't open it, but I leaned close to the gap between the door and the frame, and I said, out loud, "I know you're there." I froze, because I don't know why I said it. It just came out. The house was silent. And then, from the other side of that door, something exhaled, long, slow, like something enormous releasing a breath that had been holding for a very long time. So I slowly moved back and went back to my room, locked the door, sat on the bed with every light on, phone in hand, looking at flights until sunrise. I didn't leave, and I've thought a lot about why. Because it matters. Money was part of it. I won't pretend otherwise. Walking away from that salary had real consequences. But honestly, that wasn't the whole reason. The real reason, and this is the part that embarrasses me a little, is that I wanted to know what was down there. There's something about a forbidden space, a rule with no explanation attached to it, that creates this low-grade pull you can't quite shake. Every time I walked past that door, every time I heard something from below, the question got louder. Not what's making the sound. What is in that room? What Hargrove knew that he wasn't saying? What my predecessor had seen that landed him in a psychiatric unit? The curiosity was bigger than the fear. About 2 months in, I started dreaming differently. Not nightmares, more like transmissions. I'd wake up between 2 and 3 in the morning with no memory of any images or story. Just a sensation, the feeling of having been somewhere very old, very dark, and completely aware of me. Every night, heart elevated, the sensation fading like a signal cutting out. Then, the visual things started. I was walking past the hallway mirror one evening, and I saw something in the reflection that wasn't behind me. Just for a second, a shape, standing where the hallway curved toward the basement door. Dark, still, and tall. When I turned around, nothing was there. I stood at that mirror for a long time afterward, looking at the empty space where it had been. And then, one afternoon in the study, I heard something that shocked me. It was my mother's voice. My mother died 6 years ago. I know her voice. I always knew it anywhere, in any context, and at any volume. I heard it say my name, clearly, coming from the direction of the basement door. I didn't move for a very long time. I called Hargrove directly that night, his personal number, which I had for property emergencies. He picked up on the third ring. I told him everything I had been experiencing in the house. The sounds, the temperature at the basement hallway, the handle, the knocking, the exhale, the dreams, the mirror, my mother's voice, all of it, as straightforwardly as I could manage. He was quiet for a long time when he finished. Then he said, "How long have you been hearing your mother?" Something fell out of me when he said that. Like he already knew, and also knew it used the people you'd lost. He knew exactly what it did, and he'd let me walk into that house anyway. I panickedly asked him what was in the basement. Another silence. He said, "I've owned this property for 11 years. In that time, 5 people held your role. 2 left within the first month. No explanation. 2 stayed longer. One of those 2 is the man who had your job before you." I said I'd heard about him. He said he went into the basement. He was down there for about 40 minutes. When he came back up, he wasn't the same person who went down. He couldn't explain what he'd seen. Not because he refused, because whatever happened down there had taken the language for it away from him. I asked about the other one, the other person who had stayed longer. He said she came back fine, left on her own terms 6 months later. She's the only one I've been able to actually talk to about what it was like before she went in. She said it shows you something you've lost, or someone you love, or something you're terrified of losing, and it uses that to draw you down. And once you actually cross the threshold into that space, the terms change. I asked what terms. He said she described it as signing something, agreeing to something, without fully understanding what you were agreeing to. I asked why he kept the property if he knew all of this. He said, "Because 3 times in 11 years, I've used it." Then he ended the call. I sat with that for a long time. 3 times in 11 years he'd gone down there intentionally, made whatever arrangement that woman had described. Hargrove was 73. He'd survived 3 federal investigations without a single charge. He'd outlasted younger, better-resourced competitors who'd encountered catastrophic misfortune at exactly the wrong moments. He'd been diagnosed at 61 with something his doctors gave a 4-year median survival rate. He was 12 years past that diagnosis, and it made me thought about my mother's voice coming from that doorway, the invitation inside it. Come down, come close to what you've lost, and I thought about the price. Whatever it was, I want to know. That night, I made a decision I still think about. I took the key from the board in the kitchen. I walked to the basement door. I put the key in the lock and opened it. The cold hit immediately, not the few degrees of temperature drop from the hallway. Real cold. It was as if something was weight to it, and it felt like a message. The stairs went down about 15 feet into darkness. The light switch at the top didn't work. I used my phone's flashlight. Concrete stairs, stone walls, the smell of old earth and damp, and something else underneath. Something I recognized in the part of the brain that recognizes things before you consciously place them. I took one step down, and the darkness at the bottom changed. The flashlight wasn't working right. The beam was stopping short, like the dark down there was thick enough to push back against it. And inside that dark, at the bottom of the stairs, something was taking shape. Not clearly. It never resolved into something I could describe, but there was presence down there. Mass. The dark organized around it the way dark organizes around a large object in a room. And then I heard my mother's voice saying my name, exactly as she said it when I was a kid and she was calling me for dinner. The exact music of it, the exact vowels, the way only she said it. I knew it wasn't her, to be clear about that. I knew completely, rationally, with full certainty, that this was something using her key because it had found which key worked on me. And I took a second step down anyway, because knowing something is a trap and not walking into it are two completely different things. But here's what stopped me. On the wall, right at the doorframe, almost hidden, carved in the wood in letters that weren't recent, 5 words. It keeps what comes down. I don't know who carved it.
Maybe someone who had stood exactly where I was standing and made a different choice than the man who came before them. Someone who wanted the next person to have what they hadn't. I read it again, and my mother's voice said my name again from the bottom of the stairs. I stepped back, one step up, pulled the door shut, locked it, put the key in my pocket instead of back on the board, went to my room, didn't sleep, and in the morning, I packed. 2 hours, loaded my things into the estate vehicle, left it in the driveway with the keys on the seat, called a taxi from town, sent Sandra a one-line email saying I was leaving the position immediately for personal reasons. I walked to the end of the driveway and didn't look back. Hargrove called twice while I waited for the taxi. I didn't answer. Then he sent one text. It said, "You were wise. The one before you wasn't. I'm sorry I didn't warn you more clearly." I read that text a lot of times and realized something. The sorry, that he was sorry he didn't warn me more clearly, was not that he didn't warn me at all, but that he didn't warn me clearly enough, which means he made a deliberate choice about how much to tell me before I arrived, which means the full warning would have been specific enough to make me say no. After I left, I started doing research, local history archives, folklore records, ecclesiastical documents from that region going back to the 1800s, before the house was built, when the land itself was already known. The name that indigenous communities used for that stretch of land translates, depending on the source, to something like a place where something old stays, not lives, but stays. The distinction matters. Living implies something that was born and can die. Staying implies something that has simply always been there, before names, before anyone was counting. The farmstead on that land before the current house was built was abandoned in 1879. The family that worked it for 3 generations left in the span of 1 week that spring, resettled 40 miles away. The patriarch never mentioned the land in any document for the rest of his life, not once, like it had been removed from his memory, or like he'd made a decision to remove it himself. The only person in that family who ever wrote about it was a granddaughter in a private journal that ended up in a county archive. Her grandfather told her near the end of his life, there was something under the ground that was older than anything with a name. It understood what people wanted. It could give things, but the giving always had a price to it, and the price comes later, and it was always larger than what was given.
Thanks for watching, and also don't forget to watch our other videos as you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Goodbye.